Good morning in America, good afternoon and evening in the UK and Europe and wherever else you are. I should just say a fond hello to you. I am Rana Al-Falaki, and it is a privilege today to be moderating this exciting webinar with some fantastic people. We are talking about leadership, but leadership in a very different way today. We're going to put the elephant in the room and just ask you that question. Why on earth is your leadership training not working? Or is it? And if it is or if it isn't, let's discuss the topic and work out exactly what the reasons are, why it might be failing, and what we can do about it. So just a couple of little bits of housekeeping before we crack on. Could you please just make sure that just aware that you are all muted, but obviously there is a chat feature, so we encourage you to ask questions which they may try to answer for you while you are there. Otherwise we will have a Q&A session definitely at the end, so please do feel free to type into the Q&A at the bottom. Of course, this is being recorded, as you would have been notified as you joined. So we will be sending you a copy of the recording or a link to the recording, as well as the slides that we'll be presenting during today's webinar to you after the event. So that said, I'm very excited to introduce our fantastic panel. So starting with the phenomenal Cara Peck, who is our wonderful guest today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Cara is a strategic financial service leader and a seasoned HR leader, having been the former executive VP, head of human resources for Wells Fargo, where she led a team of 2,500 HR professionals. So I think if anybody has an idea about leadership training and managers, it's going to be you, Cara. So welcome. And Matt Kursh is really highlighting about business and industry insights today. Matt is the co-founder and the CEO of OG Lifelab. He's a serial entrepreneur, some amazing accolades, having sold his first company to Apple and his second one to Microsoft. And while at Microsoft, Matt actually ran the company's primary internet business. So welcome, Matt. Lovely to see you today. And
thank you, Rana.
Definitely not least, we have the amazing, wonderful Andrea, who's one of my heroes. So Andrea Hoban is the co-founder and head of learning at OG Lifelab. Over the past decade, Andrea has parlayed her management experience into leadership development and executive coaching practices. As a certified coach, a speaker, and a practitioner, she has helped thousands of professionals learn to harness their emotions to achieve their goals. And of course, at OG, she is reimagining the way that we learn skills like leadership and emotional intelligence to improve the quality of our lives. So quite a treat for you all today. So that said, I think we have to get started. So welcome to all of you. Matt, I'd just like to kick off with you, if I may. This title, your leadership training isn't working. And maybe, why might it be failing? How true do you actually believe that is?
Well, let me put it in context for you, Rana. We're OG, Andrea and I are from OG. And our firm is a leadership learning company. We sell a family of mobile learning products that combine self-paced learning and live coach-led learning like this over Zoom. And we have great customers at firms like Johnson & Johnson and Amazon and Google and Yale New Haven Hospital and California State Parks. So that's where we're coming from. That's what we're all about. And, the reason Andrea and I started the company, along with our co-founders, Mark Brackett and Robin Stern, who are at Yale, who run the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. The reason we started the company is because our belief was there was this huge gap between books. I should grab a book, great books like this. Give yourself a nudge from one of our partners. You could read a book, But unless you're some kind of android, reading a book does not make you better at something. It's not like you can load that program into your head. And so what do? We send people to workshops. We send people to watch video series. And our passion and our belief is those don't work. And we think all the evidence shows that they don't work. People enjoy them. People will say that they're influential in their thinking. People will say that it was a positive experience. They love the moderator. They love getting together with their colleagues. But if you really test the results, you see they're not really gaining skills that they can use for the long term. So that's why our company exists. And we're really excited now, particularly because we have some new products for the leadership market. We're really excited to be out here and kind of pick a fight and tell a story about why we think we can do a lot better with helping to grow our leaders.
This is brilliant. So I'm going to get deeper into that in a minute, but of course, with the phenomenal accolades that OG Lifelab have, of which I am, I find it a true honor to be associated with you guys as well through that. I know we are going to go into a little bit more of what OG has to offer at the end. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We'll get into that more just to bring some context.
Okay, fantastic. So, okay, Matt, so the research that was actually done at the time of the pandemic estimated that the global investment in leadership training, bit of a drum roll for this amount of money, $370.3 billion globally, of which the North America was $169 billion. I mean, that's a lot. So with that amount spent, is it fair to say that all of that investment is resulting in poor or mediocre leaders?
Yeah, I don't know if it's all, but I think, we recently did this study, Rana, that you're, I think, aware of with Harris Research, 2,000 people around the US interviewed about their experience with managers. And specifically wanted to compare first-time managers and the best manager you've ever had. And basically, what people said is when they worked for a first-time manager, 4 out of 10 people said they were lousy at their jobs. They didn't know how to make good decisions. They didn't know how to run a meeting. They didn't know how to communicate effectively. So think about professions or areas of work where you'd accept the notion that 4 out of 10 people are bad at their job. And it was so bad that 1 out of 3 people said they thought about quitting their job because of the lack of skills of this first-time manager. So that's a first-time manager. You might say it gets better, but Harvard Business Review had an article years ago saying that the average manager doesn't get any training for 10 years. So for 10 years, you get no training. And then after 10 years, maybe you get a weekend workshop. That's just not a success. And the results seem to really bear that out.
That's really useful, Matt. Thank you. And that poll is actually incredibly interesting. And I know that it's been featured on BBC, Forbes, Time. It's a really powerful poll, that Harris poll. I think, why don't we actually bring our audience in a little bit, because you just mentioned some interesting statistics there. So why don't we create a little poll for our guests today and kick off with maybe let's start with stress and anxiety, because that is just such a massive thing that leads on to a lot of the other consequences you talked about. So let's just see if they agree with the Harris poll. So have you ever felt stress or anxiety about going to work due to your manager? Yes or no? We would love to know. Let's just give you a sort of 10 seconds.
I think the trend is clear, Rana.
Mm-hmm.
100% say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we all know what the consequences of that are going to be. Yeah, here we go. So not quite 100% there, Matt. Maybe the other 4% were those non-average managers who had impeccable training right from the offset.
Exactly.
Waiting 10 years, right? So 96%. So can we just bring up the slide that shows the comparison with the Harris poll? So yeah, well, we have some it's a slightly different demographic here today, but it may be that they are rather than going out into the general public, it's people who are specifically interested in leadership. So I think that's a telling difference within that statistic, right? So very, very interesting. Thank you. It's just 96% of you guys here today, if you didn't see that result by comparison, are suffering from that. So Cara, this would be a wonderful, you have had a phenomenally huge amount of experience when it comes to HR. So does what Matt has said and those poll findings align with your experience in HR?
Well, definitely. Well, first of all, the spend is great. And I think it's really challenging. And Matt mentioned it to understand the ROI, because there's not a lot of metrics around it. And when we think about leadership, we think about specific skill training. We don't think about leadership and how it should be integrated. And then we confuse the fact that managing is not leading. And so, having worked at Wells Fargo for 20 plus years, we introduced new manager training for the company in my 18th year there. So that just tells you some of the businesses had it, some of it didn't. And new manager training went from everything from how do you literally fill out paper? What are the processes? How do you do that? It wasn't about coaching. It wasn't about feedback. It wasn't about motivation. It wasn't about all the things that are part of managing and leading. So it was it's very difficult. It's not something that people put focus on. People tend to, as Matt said, 10 years later, they think about, oh, well, how do we develop these folks? And the adage has been around forever. People don't leave companies, they leave their managers.
Very true, very true. And I think, there's a very interesting point there that often people do get appointed, right? It becomes a title. Oh, we're going to promote you. We're going to make you a manager. But a title does not make a person, like with anything, with any other kind of label, right?
Absolutely.
So
and then we think we can train a specific, oh, that person isn't very good at coaching, so we'll just send them to coaching, but they might not do one-on-ones regularly. I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody last week who got a brand new manager. So they're a pretty seasoned manager and they have a team of 1,400 people and they're meeting with somebody, and the manager said, yeah, you're good, you're doing it, we'll touch base once a month and see how it's going. I mean, really? I mean, that's not great leadership. It's not good management either.
Let me ask you one more question, then I want to go to Andrea. Where would you draw the line between management skills and leadership? Are they one and the same, or where is the overlap?
No, they're not one and the same. And I think that management has a lot of administration with it. Leadership has a lot of people with it. And I think that's where the crossover is the people. So we tend to, oh, this person might be very good doing things administratively. They can manage a team, but they might have no people skills. Other people in leadership, how do leaders motivate? They inspire, they take the strategy to the next level. They do all of the things that a manager should be able to do as well, but we mistake the two. And we say, oh, it's okay. They have great administrative skills. They get their reviews written. They get the budgets into the in time. They, do all the things collectively that we think about from a management point of view, but they could be terrible with their people skills.
Yeah, that reminds me of a phrase that I've often heard about: people get promoted to their highest level of incompetence.
Yeah. And, one of our experts, Linda Hill, talks about how management is really about dealing with complexity and leadership is about dealing with change or the future. And so you really need to be able to do both when you're in a management position. You have to be able to deal with the complexity, as Cara said, of all of our daily tasks and responsibilities, and be able to have a vision of where you're headed and to take your people with you. And it's not easy. And to your point, when we're promoted, whoever taught us anything about that? If we're coming from an individual contributor role, we're not taught how to have that perspective or to understand that our role is really twofold in that way. So I just thought I'd add that in.
No, that's brilliant, Andrea. So exactly that. So from a leadership and development point of view, and in terms of kind of a design perspective for how leadership training should be done, how it is currently being done, why do you think it's failing?
Well, gosh, we could probably spend a half day talking about that, and especially as a person that used to lead, day-long, week-long seminars and workshops. Like I love that stuff, and I love working with people. And I think maybe it's really useful to even just start out by saying there's usually two objectives to getting people together for that kind of learning experience. One of which is stated, we want people to be able to learn the skills. And we have found that in a compressed amount of time, you cannot learn the skills. It's a download, right? It's the proverbial drinking through the fire hose. The other goal, which is often unstated, is that we want a group of people to bond or feel connected to each other because of the roles that they play. And for that, I think that's why these kinds of workshops continue to happen, and why we were so gloriously happy to be able to do them again post-COVID, is this unstated goal is being met by getting people together. But if we really want to move the needle on where our leadership team is headed and advance their capability to deal with an increasingly complex and volatile world, we are doing them a disservice if we don't actually figure out a way to help them build the skills that deal with both complexity and change.
So what I'm hearing you say, it's a difference between going to a workshop, reading a book like Matt suggested, which gives you information but not implementation.
Yeah.
And ultimately, true leadership and management skills is about acquiring skills. And so from what I'm hearing you saying, it takes time to acquire those skills. So you need time to put them into practice, get feedback, and improve them. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's totally what you're hearing. Yeah. And, we, even working with one of our co-founders, Mark Brackett, we have seen that unfold time and time again around emotional intelligence, which is also a set of skills, right? In that you get a chance to know what they are around recognition and regulation of your emotions, but just knowing that doesn't mean you can do it. So it takes practice. You have to have tools to be able to understand, how would I know what I'm feeling right now? What does that mean about what the situation I'm in and what I can do in it? Do I need to shift to something else? How would I do that? Is it even possible for me to shift? There's to come at it day after day with some, as you said, feedback, some coaching, some information that just allows you to have the perspective you need to be able to do that skill of recognizing and regulating. Over time, you can see a difference. Your capability is increased, and you gain confidence from seeing the fact that you can handle things differently now than before when you started this training. And so this kind of spaced repetition idea is really key to leadership skills. Because again, sitting in a workshop with even the smartest people in the world is not going to turn you into a brilliant leader.
Yeah. And if we look at that triangle of learning, when you get to experience something, but you actually truly get to put it into practice, that's when you get to the sort of 70 to 90% implementation rate versus 10, 20%, which is all you're going to get if you're actually only at a workshop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you might walk away with a great idea, but how many of us I'm actually curious for the people that are joining too, to share what kind of role you play in your organization, because some of you undoubtedly are probably rolling out leadership programs. Some of you may have participated in them. So if you wouldn't even mind telling us what kind of role you have in your organization, that I think would be even help us hone our conversation even more tightly. But I say that because how many of us have walked away from some amazing workshop with a binder that we treasured? We put all of our hard work, we wrote in it throughout the whatever workshop we were in. And then we come home and we're like, that was amazing. And we put the binder on a shelf and we never open it again, ever.
Except you did post the selfie of you on the workshop on social media.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So,
Exactly.
I'd love let's get our audience just another one of these Harris polls, and then I just want to come back to Cara, because we were talking about stress and anxiety, we're talking about leaving your job, trouble sleeping, but also one of the biggest things when it comes to performance skills, one of the 4 biggest failures that affect people's performance is ultimately their lack of motivation. And again, this was something that was looked at in the Harris poll. So it would be, I think that would be really interesting, because lack of motivation encompasses, how we ultimately perform. And part of that job is obviously from our leader and from our manager, but part of it, of course, comes from other elements. So the question to you is, we got that poll. Have you ever felt a lack of motivation at work due to your manager? Yes or no? It's a little drum roll while we wait for those results. And then if we can, we'll get the results up for you in a second and compare it to our Harris poll, which was 2,000 people. Is that right?
Yeah, just over.
Beautiful. Look at that, 92% lack of motivation due to the manager compared to just 8% for possibly for other reasons. So 92%, I mean, can you imagine the effect that that actually has on an organization and the ultimate performance and end goals, productivity, buy-in, and everything else that comes with it? Can we compare that to our results for the Harris poll? It was 92% here. Have we got that slide? There we go. So yeah, we definitely have a different cohort here. So with the Harris poll, 35%. So who's is it the Harris poll, it's the general population, or is it, I think most of us in the leadership world would probably agree with the 92%. So Cara, on that, working for a big organization, how do you get to pick and choose who gets the training and who doesn't?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's very bias led, right? So oftentimes it's who are your high performers and why don't we help them even perform greater? And so I think that's what's so really interesting about new manager training. It takes the bias out. Like, you're a new manager. Doesn't matter where you were, you're a new manager, and we're going to invest in you on managing and also developing those people skills. So that's one of the things that was always a struggle too. As you could see, like, one person would work for somebody and then they would go work for somebody else and they would do so much better. And last year we were talking about this person not being an okay, and now we're talking about them being a high performer. And so there's a lot of bias in how we select people for development. So I think that's what makes this so interesting and such a great thing for a company, is to let's put everybody in an even playing field and do this new manager training and see how we develop this cohort of managers.
And you may well get the high performers coming out through them that you may not have expected by having the opportunity to develop those skills.
Correct. And by the way, I did want to run over to my drawer and pull out the 27,000 binders I have back there since the dawn of time, from leading sales teams and marketing teams and HR, of every single seminar I've ever went to. I kept them all, which is kind of weird.
And now it's digital, so it doesn't even look good. You don't even have the satisfaction, right?
Can't throw them away. I've got them too. And I just I pull them out every once in a while. Like, I can't toss it, but I never look at the innards of it. It just like reminds me of a great time or something that sparked that didn't stick.
So Andrea, what are we going to do about it? How do we solve the problem? We've talked about, leadership skills. You touched on the emotional intelligence, the stuff we do with OG Emotions in terms of helping to develop skills. So what are the leadership skills that can actually be taught?
Well, I mean, there's so many that can be taught. The ones that we have honed in on have to do with, parsing the differences and similarities between management and leadership. Those are both set of skills. Listening, which is not a often taught skill or focused on, but there's so much research out there that says when we listen, not only does performance improve, but our relationships at work improve. And so this, as you can see, like, would commingle nicely with leadership and management, partially because what Linda Hill, our leadership and management expert, points out is often, especially as new managers, we avoid, well, not really avoid, but we spend a lot of time managing down and managing up, but we don't manage our relationships laterally. and that can bite us later. And so if I'm a listener, how much more can I consume and learn from people around me, whether they're up, down, or around? So there's that skill set. There are things that we can be doing as leaders that amplify equity and bring really useful diversity to teams, and create a sense of belonging and a supportive culture that, again, helps everyone perform at their highest level. So we bring that into the frame. Feedback is something that historically we don't do well. We have a lot of pain around it personally, having received feedback in the past. And so feedback is also something that we feel is really essential to know how to give, but also receive. So back to listening, and how to seek it out. And, if I'm a new manager, I've got a lot to learn. And Joy asked this question about mentorship. Like, how does that factor into this training aspect? I mean, obviously the best learning that we can ask for is on the job learning, like that we're learning as we go. And so to be able to listen, seek feedback, take it in, change our behavior as a result of what we're hearing from people allows us to grow faster and become more effective as managers. Emotional intelligence is definitely part of the skill set that's really important here, because if we're not regulated, calm, grounded leaders that know when to act with urgency and get people, performing because things aren't going right. Like there's that level of, sometimes we have to be very intense with people. Sometimes we need to kick things off and be invigorated and motivated and inspirational. And so to understand how your emotions play into the culture of your team and how you're perceived and how well they feel about your leadership, that's a big part of it. And also decision making. As managers, we make decisions all day long. Some of them are small, some of them are pretty big. And if we don't have some way of approaching a decision that is based on our values, the company's values, that helps us see what we want to take and consider as many options as possible, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice and possibly the organization that we work for as well. So did I miss any skills there, Matt? I feel like that's a lot. And so
well, leadership, management, decision-making, emotional intelligence, equity, diversity, inclusion, and there was
listening, feedback.
Listening and feedback.
Well, and it's really interesting because you said feedback's really painful, but listening actually helps the feedback more, because we're talking to somebody, you listen to, like, ask them, what are your goals, aspirations, where do you want to be? That gives you a guideline in giving feedback. It's like, Andrea, remember when you talked to me about how you wanted to do this? Well, here's a way. I've noticed that you've done it this way, but I think that it could be better if you did it this way. You can give people feedback with their own words, right? How powerful is that?
totally.
And I think in the Q&A about the mentorship, that's the other place where you can, if you have a great, let's say a leader or manager that's mentoring you, you can ask them, I need to give feedback to this person. This is what I've heard from the person, and how do I do this? Or, asking questions so you can learn from everybody. As much as you can learn is how you develop those skills. And that's why, you get this. You were talking about, getting feedback from all of these places, up, down, but most importantly around you as well.
I think it's important to say in that, just to summarize what you guys are saying, is that those skills are all, none of them are in isolation.
No.
Even the feedback, you need to have really strong and powerful emotional intelligence skills.
Yes.
To be able to handle the feedback and the listening and so on and so forth. Right? So really important how they interlink. So on that, Matt, what are OG's strengths to help that interlinking? Because you're not going to go to a workshop on decision making and another one on management. We're talking about interlinking all of these skills together. So where does OG come in addressing that?
Well, I think the first thing is we've used the word skill 345 times here, and that's appropriate. And we often use the word mastery, and we view ourselves as a mastery-centered learning company. That our obsession is about mastery. And it may seem like a small distinction, but I really do think it's a profound one. I mean, I'll bring out Ralph's book again. So you can read this book and you can remember some of the key ideas and you can think it was fantastic. But what you've done is you've learned about decision making. You can describe it. And that kind of descriptive function is useful. You can write a really nice email or put together a deck and show it to your team, and you can talk about it. But we're not here to help people know about the thing. Nobody here who's working in HR or leadership position wants their team to know something about fill in the blank. Oh, I know something about feedback. No, you want them to be good at giving feedback. And so, that's where our approach is different, and that's our obsession. And part of that view, to your point, Rana, is finding these connections between all these different subjects, because they're not isolated. I'm an obsessive tennis player, as anybody who's talked to me for more than 5 minutes knows. Learning how to hit a forehand volley is not going to win you any tennis games. It's like, that's just one skill. There's 50 other skills. You need to put them all together. You need to be able to use them together. So our program, we just came out with a new program called OG Foundations, which is for first-time managers, which is why we've been doing research in that area. And what Andrea and her team has done is really linked all these things together so that over time, you're finding out how I can use my leadership skills are being informed by my listening, and my decision making is being informed by my emotional intelligence. Because you know what? You can't make a really great decision if you can't recognize where you are emotionally, because we all know what kind of decisions we make when we're, for instance, afraid or emotionally flooded or overwhelmed. My kids are young adults now, and they know enough to say, Dad, don't ask me that now. I can't make that decision because I'm just not in that frame of mind. But do people know how to do that in the workplace? So, our programs are all about, over time, bit by bit, building up these skills so that when real life situations occur, you don't just think, oh yeah, I took a really good workshop on that once. There's a binder for it somewhere in my office. That's not really useful. You want to be able to say, oh gosh, I need to emotionally regulate right now. So first I need to do is recognize my emotional state, and then I need to base that, choose an appropriate regulation strategy. And I have a variety of those that I know, and I'm going to use some deep breathing, and then I'm also going to call a friend to give me some feedback. That's what you need to build. And I think what's frustrating to see is that we often are providing people with training that talks about these things, but just cannot deliver on that. Like you can't expect somebody to become a really good leader because you sent them to a leadership workshop for 3 days. That's just, when you think about it, if you really just step back from it, could I really become a good leader? No, I can't. It's not possible. And so that's why our programs deliver little bits of learning over time on your phone in a way that helps you build skills. So we really think it's really key to find those connections and do it bit by bit.
I'll just add that I think my experience in working with new managers is we come into the work for the first time managing people and we think, this is so hard. It must be me. And so a big part of, I think, the learning process for a new manager is community. Part, again, why we're drawn to put people in cohorts and do things in groups, because there's a big aha and there's light bulbs that really go on for people when they realize they're not alone in their struggle. It's hard because the nature of management is hard, not because they don't have the capability of doing it. And so to me, a successful leadership development program does have that social component in there where people can talk about their different challenges and get reinforcement from somebody who's been there, done that, and can provide them some perspective that maybe they didn't have before. And so, that's something that asynchronously is built into what we do, but it also is built into the live components of what we offer, so that people can also get at that second unstated objective, which is, this learning is a social experience. And I will learn as much from other people as I will learn from my own process that Matt just described.
And you will always get different types of learners, the ones who are very forthcoming with asking questions or offering suggestions, and then you get the quiet ones who just like to listen. So actually bringing people into that group environment becomes incredibly, incredibly powerful. Cara, just to bring you in on what Andrea and Matt have been saying. So how do you get the support for a change like this compared to traditional workshops and more versions of binders?
Well, I think one key component is it's cost effective.
Okay.
So, we talked about the billions spent on development without not a lot of metrics. And I think that this is also a cost effective way and a way that you can measure. And so that I think that is very appealing. And then starting specific, like with a specific group of managers or a small group, so that you can really see how it works inside the company is always a great way. It just depends on how small or large your company is. But let's say you have a company that only has 25 managers. Well, that's great. It's an easy, cost-effective way to kind of take a look at it and see how people learn in this way. I also think that in particular, I mean, technology was driving changes in the learning community pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, after we've gone through it, we've all our brains have been rewired to do things a little bit differently. And there's just a lot going on, and technology has made us so many things. And so thinking about buy-in on micro-learning, little bits of pieces, doing it daily, building that skill set, building that mastery over time in a cost-effective way is pretty appealing.
Thank you for that. And I imagine also the cost-effective way is also not having all your managers out of the office.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, really, because you could say, okay, team lab, maybe, I don't know, Andrea, how long, maybe it's 30 minutes a week. I can't remember, but you have these little things on a daily basis. It's not a huge amount of time commitment, but it's also about building that skill over time. And I think people don't realize, I certainly realized it doing the emotional intelligence app, that it's not a huge investment in time and you can really learn a lot.
Yeah, and 10 minutes a day, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, I imagine through that it continues to build a skill set, even in terms of daily habits.
Absolutely.
Which is also something you ultimately need for when you're needing to lead a team. So again, we're kind of integrating everything across the board is what I'm hearing you all say. Matt, just going back to the research you shared about lack of training for first-time management and this OG foundations. And obviously, Andrea has told us about the 7 skills. Or if we go, I feel like I can't use that word now that you've called it out.
347 times now, thanks to you.
The seven areas of mastery that we've talked about. What does it cost?
So our new product is for the whole learning program. You learn the 7 skills. There's a lot of live learning. We can talk more about it later. It's $1,249 a person. So our goal is that it's priced in such a way, frankly, that it's kind of a no-brainer. That if you think it's really important for this manager to be effective, to motivate the team, to stay with the company, $1,249 is a very reasonable price. And, you know, one of the things we've talked a lot about what it takes to help people really learn. I think the other side of this, and that we're really passionate about, is how do we show that the learning is happening? So, you know, often what happens is we say, hey, I sent somebody, I mean, there's kind of gradations of it. We send people to a workshop. A lot of you know the term smile sheets, the sheets you put out on the chairs and ask, how was the workshop? And people say, I had a good time. And so they say, okay, well, that's great. So we all know that doesn't mean learning happened. It might be that you liked hanging out with your colleagues and you thought the lunch was good. Another way we assess it is, did they retain the information? But I don't have to say it again. The information is not the point. Having somebody say, yes, the key steps in emotional intelligence are recognizing your emotions, choosing a regulation strategy, and then implementing that regulation strategy. That doesn't mean you're emotionally intelligent, but what we do is give somebody a quiz, and we all have done them 1,000 times. And then when people answer the questions correctly, we say they know they have gained that skill. So we're not really satisfied with that, and we have a very different approach, and I won't go into it in great detail, but it's really all about finding real examples in people's work life and in their home life where they can show that the learning has provided a benefit. Something good happened because of what you learned. And to us, that's the ultimate measure. And we just finished a big project with Amazon where over the entire group, people had almost 3 instances per person where they could say, because of the learning, I did something better. And that's a really great outcome, because you know that's real value, and you know that's they listed 3, but there are another 30 that they didn't list because they didn't take the time to do it. And so I think you know, to your question to Cara about how do you make it work, part of making it work is having a way to show that it did work after you put the time and money into it. And that's a big part of what we do.
I'll just add too, that I think that post-COVID, our, you know, Cara, you brought this up, our tolerance, our acceptance, maybe is a better word, of different kinds of modalities in learning has gotten much higher. Like, you know, the way that we use Zoom now is definitely surpasses anybody's wildest imaginations about all the ways that it reached into our lives during COVID. So I say that because, you know, why do workshops persist? It's because, you know, a lot of senior leaders, that's how they learned. And so they say, okay, I got a group of people that needs to be better at something, put them in a workshop, let's get them going. And so this legacy persists. And for those of us who are learning nerds like me, or, you know, in charge of developing people in some form or another, I've got to say, we can do better now. Like, no matter what organization you're at, you have a toolkit that far surpasses the ability to lead a workshop. So why aren't we taking these notions around spaced repetition and, you know, social learning and other aspects that we've talked about here and doing it for ourselves? So, you know, that's to me one of the meta points of why we wanted to have this conversation publicly, is not just to say, you know, we have a great program, because I'm very proud of what we put together. But that said, like, we can all be a part of this new lift and what happens in leadership development that makes everyone a better learner and more effective in their organization by trying some different ways of helping people learn, not just doing things at the convenience of the leader or the availability of the conference room or the trainer that can come to your organization next week. And so everybody else is you know, put off their regular schedule because of somebody else's convenience. And there can be a better way.
Well, in addition, it's scalable.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, it's affordable and it's scalable. But in addition to that, it's access. So I think that that's the thing. I access a lot more things today because of Zoom, right? I don't have to drive 60 minutes to go to a meeting. I don't have to take my daughter to a specialist in San Francisco. I can do a Zoom meeting. But how many people are remote now? How many people have a remote hiring strategy where they're hiring people that live all over the country, but how do they get access without having to have them get on an airplane, pay for a hotel, go to, the workshop, as Matt loves my term, to get sheep dipped, which is, you go there for 2 days and you go home. And then, so it's accessible and it's scalable. Those are the two key things about this program that I love.
And I want to build on something that Andrea and Cara said. We're talking about essentially all these different elements. And there was the question, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce the name right, Ajoy asked about mentorship, and Andrea touched on it. And, I think as training changes, as technology changes, as the workplace changes, we can put together the idea of learning in a totally different way. It's the right time because we're changing everything anyways.
Right.
And mentorship, as an example, what's the advantage of mentorship? Well, that person who's a mentor has the advantage of knowing the person, and they have the advantage of knowing their context, and they have the advantage of being able to do things face to face. That's terrific. It's great to take advantage of that. Now let's think of the whole picture. Is a particular mentor going to be a world-class expert on the discipline of leadership or decision-making or emotional intelligence? No, of course not. That's not their advantage. But the cool thing is we can collectively access those people. Like Cara said, they're out there. We can reach them now. That's what we do as part of our business in all of our products. We would love to learn a little bit over time. That's a better way to learn. Every learning scientist will tell you that. It's not very convenient if you want to put people in a classroom together. You're not going to file people into some conference room 15 minutes a day. It's a really bad idea. But now we're all carrying one of these and we can learn whenever we want. So it's a time when we can recombine and reimagine what learning is. And, we hope that many companies take this approach, both for their own internal use and, providing it out into the marketplace, because, our folks deserve something better. We throw them in the deep end and say, you're responsible for these people, you're responsible for our business, you're responsible to our shareholders, you're responsible to the executives. And by the way, we hope you figure out how to do this job because we're not going to teach you. And you're a good lawyer, you're a good, physician, or you're a good coder, but you don't know any of this other stuff because you never learned any of this stuff. And we hope you figure it out quickly because we're counting on you. And this is the time when we really can reimagine how we serve them.
Yeah. And actually, you have so many professionals there who aren't in corporate, who would have small organizations, and ultimately they are professionals. They're not trained, they're not managers. So if I summarize an awful lot of the key points that the three of you have brought up here, other than the fact that it's a phenomenal integration of 7 key skill areas. Sorry, just had to get it in again. We're talking, access. We're talking development of daily habits. We're talking higher performance. We're talking optimal learning, which is through repetition. We're talking spaced repetition. We're talking affordability. We're talking people not needing to be out of the office. We're talking access, and also actually the way people work, not just the phone, but also actually so many people are still working from home. So that management, a lot of it is going on online. They don't meet face to face. They are needing to have meetings online to listen and to offer feedback. And actually, so they almost get that real life experience through an OG experience. Is actually how they work. It's another way to look at it as well. Andrea, on that note, just a couple of minutes before, if there are any more questions, I think we've answered the mentorship one, then please do put them in the chat. But I know Matt obviously shared the example of some of our clients from Amazon and how that had, having gone through OG Emotions, how that had helped develop what they were doing and their performance. Any others that you might like to share? Because you guys have some big names as clients.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are going through OG foundations now that I'm just really struck by their insights that they're having, which I get to see because I'm myself coaching some of their live sessions as they go through the program. And, even people I would say that are not new managers are getting real value out of participating. One I would say mid to senior leader, I think he's a director level at a household name company you would know, was talking about how, he's pretty good at prepping for things, but he's not very good at all at reviewing afterwards. And that's something Linda Hill talks about, like, do we have a system of, thinking, prepping in advance, doing the thing, and then reviewing it afterwards. And even if we are somewhat good at that, it's usually because something went wrong and we do a postmortem on it. We're not very good at doing it when things go right and learning from our successes. Another manager who's going through the program works in the agriculture business, and she oversees several people who are pretty new to the role, and they travel around and they take soil samples and they do all kinds of things related to agriculture support. And she in her head knows she should not be doing everything, but it is so hard for her to begin delegating. To like know when to throttle back on the doing and when to hand things off and mentor and guide and oversee and check in. It's because it takes a lot of work to do that. And again, because a lot of us came from an individual contributor role where we were really good at that thing, it's easier to roll up our shirt sleeves and just do it rather than bring people along with us. And then there's another woman who's going through our program. She's a head of school in Saudi Arabia. And she's talking about how, she's always thought of herself as a leader, but never as a manager. And so much of her work is about managing resources and people and administration, et cetera. And so to have that different perspective on her work has given her different permission to get into certain details that I think that, were not as transparent to her in the past. So what's really encouraging is that we all have something to learn from the experts. That's the other thing, is it's not like just was my idea that I came up with one night. And I think a lot of leadership training has that bent to it. If somebody had a best-selling idea and now they think everybody should do it that way. And instead, our approach is to always work with people who have studied the field, researched it, have validated their findings, and can tell us something about their field of study that is useful for us practitioners. And that's that, I think, that being the spine of the program gives people a lot of reinforcement of like, oh, I see, if I added this, or I thought of my work this way, or I got more involved with my people, then I could achieve what I'm trying to achieve more easily. And so that's like so encouraging to see all of these 7 skills start to interweave and affect people, not because we think of our 7 skills and all of our different aspects of our job, but because they do overlap and weave together and make us a better leader when we can do all of them with more skill.
Wonderful. And I think also what I heard you say, or the kind of the hint there is that any participant they still maintain their own individuality. This is not some set platform saying you must do it this way as per the red manual or the blue binder. It's about development of that person and optimizing their skills so that they can then go in and use their approach and then get feedback and continue to develop their way of doing things based on a solid foundation.
Totally. It totally, takes into account the complexity and intelligence of the leader going through the program. And, the other aspect of what I find fascinating and validating for our learners is that it's appealing and useful to an international audience. It's also not so North American focused with a North American style that people who live elsewhere and, are dealing with different cultures are finding the value in that too. And so I would just add that into the insights that I think that all of us, again, as learning professionals, can take away.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid. And obviously I can vouch for that work because of course I deal with a lot of your European counterpart, and you don't want to know what we say about the North Americans on our
Oh,
I have an idea.
Matt, tell us, we've got a few minutes left. Tell us about this incredible offer.
Sure. Well, just to kind of put some meat on the bone about OG. So we have 4 learning programs. I think John's going to show up. 4 learning programs that address leadership in different ways. We've mentioned a little bit about OG Foundations. That's our new program for first-time managers. Later this year, we're going to ship OG Lead, which is for experienced leaders. And then our prior products are OG Emotions, which is an emotional intelligence training program we built with our co-founders at Yale, and OG Decide, which is about decision making. And each of these work using our own special software platform where you work through at your own pace a set of self-paced mini lessons. They're about 10 or 15 minutes. But it works like every other app on your phone. You can spend a minute or two when you're waiting for your lunch to come out of the microwave, or when you're sitting on the sofa with your spouse at the end of the day. You can do it whenever you want, in whatever increments you want. And these programs, OG Emotions and OG Decide, have about 50 little learning steps. Usually takes a couple months. And OG Foundations is even deeper. It takes more like 4 or 5 months, but you do it at your own pace. And then kind of the secret sauce, Rana, as you know, is it incorporates live learning using video right into the program. So that is just something that happens seamlessly. And you have group conversations over video led by an OG coach. You have sometimes one-on-ones. And there's also cohort-based learning where you're part of a team and you work with a team over the course of the program. So it's got all the flexibility and convenience of mobile, but the kind of personal touch of live learning. And that's, I think, what our clients really love, is that it's so scalable and easy, but also personal and alive. So that's the portfolio we have. And just to reiterate what Andrea said about the leaders, I think we have a slide about some of the people we work with. You see at the top left and bottom left, our co-founders, Mark and Robin. Linda Hill is our kind of special partner on OG Foundations. Linda is a professor at Harvard Business School, really one of the most respected experts on leadership and innovation. And so Linda is really core to that program. And you see some of the other people we work with. And so every time you learn something in one of our programs, it's coming from a real world expert who's researched it. And I want to emphasize, they're not going to just talk about it. They're going to actually teach you how to do it. And sorry, my
just died. Can you hear me still? It's all
Yes.
good. So that's who we are and where we come from. And you mentioned this special promotion. We go to the last slide. So anybody who attended this webinar, whether you did it live or not, you can get OG Foundations at 50% off till the end of the month. So that's a really special deal. We just announced the program a couple of weeks ago. So we're offering this promotion so we can build some new relationships in organizations. You see here the 7 areas we cover, and you can scan this QR code to go and learn more about the promotion. And if we go to the last slide, here are addresses, web addresses you can go to, and you can scan the QR code for the promotion. Or there's a QR code here to learn more about the research we did around first-time managers. And we would love to, if you take a look on our website and you find it interesting, we would love for you to spend some time with our staff and learn more about the program, and we can give you the details. But I think what you'll find is that it's really a unique approach, and it's unique because we're aiming at a different target. Our target is to help you build real mastery, that we are looking for you to have people who say, these programs fundamentally change the way I do what I do. They make me more effective at work. They make me more effective in my personal life. And I'm putting it to work every day. And that's really what gets us out of bed every morning, is the goal of helping people do things better.
And I would just love to add that it's also fun, right? No one wants to do that isn't enjoyable. And I think everybody who works at OG does create that environment of people, any of our clients who come to us know that they're always going to have an insightful and enjoyable time as well, which is always going to help and aid learning too. So just to add that, thank you so much to our panel. Thank you so much to those of you who are listening. John, can you just bring that slide back up again? Because in the interest of the social media and the binders, I would love you all who are listening to take a screenshot of this and post it with your name hashtagged across it and hashtag OG Lifelab on social media, please, just to say you have done some fascinating, insightful learning and participated in this today. So thank you. And that email address is there. So like Matt did say, if you do have any feedback, if you'd like any more information, then please do feel free to email us. And of course, as we said at the start, we will be sending out a recording as well as the slides that we have shared. And so on that note, thank you one more time to our amazing panelists this morning.
Thank you,
Rana.
Cara. Thank you, Rana.
Thank you, Matt. Thank
And
you.
see you again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.